Welcome back. We have Ty Anderson with us, Bruins writer, obviously, and host of the Hockey Show on 98.5, the Sports Hub, and friend of Joe from the Joe Show, who's also a friend of ours, because he is going to be on tomorrow, right, Kasey?
Yeah.
He's going to be on...
Boston's entered the chat.
Boston has entered the chat. And he was singing Kasey's praises. He was singing your praises. He loves you, Ty.
Joe's the best. Joe is great. Joe is like first team all good guy every year. That's how I describe Joe.
I just met him for the first time yesterday, and he was awesome. Anyway, we have you on to talk Bruins. You were at morning... I keep calling it morning skate. God darn it.
No.
Practice. Just practice. They're not playing today. I keep calling it morning skate today. I had a nightmare, by the way, that I was screwing up on air all night last night, so I'm still
really
in a living
wants to watch
nightmare.
The San Jose Sharks play hockey.
I kept calling the Islanders the San Jose Sharks in my dreams last night. It's a whole thing, but it's continuing.
I had a dream I got denied going to cover the game in New York. That's
What?
so yeah. So
Tell
I had
me.
a dream that I forgot my press pass. And I had to text people to be like, hey, can I get in? And everyone was busy because the game already started. So these nightmares, they are real nightmares. They're not fun.
No, they're not fun. And then you wake up and it's like rolling in. It's like you're rolling in and you're wondering, how do I make sure I don't screw up my pass or call the wrong team name? Can we just get a break from work too? Do I have to dream about work? Please.
Not until the season's over, unfortunately, for both of you.
I know, I'm complaining a lot about the condensed schedule, but with that condensed schedule, Razors made this point on air. You can lose 5 in a row really quick, and then you can win 5 in a row really quick because the games just keep rolling into each other. The Bruins now on a win streak, finally, again. We have so many topics we want to cover with you, but I think the overall big theme, I answered no to this, but I'd love your take. Do you think we've seen enough of this Bruins to kind of know what their identity is so far through 13, 14 games?
You've seen a little bit of it, right? I think you see it in the Carolina game, obviously. You saw it, I think, in parts of the Colorado game the previous Saturday. You know what they want to be. It's just, can they be it all the time, right? You have to get excellent goaltending. You have to get strong special teams, PK notably. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard way to win. We've all acknowledged that. I think the Bruins themselves have acknowledged that it's tough to do this for 82 games. But that's a challenge in front of them, right? They realize they don't have the most talent, the most goal scoring, the most, offense, the most speed, whatever it is. But they know that they trust their defensive structure, they trust their goaltending, and they trust their PK. And so this has to be the formula. Now, can it be for 82 games? That remains to be seen. But I do feel like, we have to be a little bit patient here. They just finished 14 games in 25 days. It's really hard to figure out what you have and what you can be when you're basically just playing to keep the lights on, so to speak. You're not getting a lot of practice time. You're not getting a lot of reps that aren't game reps. And so you're kind of just trying to survive it, right? And it feels like the Bruins at 7-7 survived it. And now it becomes, forging that identity and being that team every day. And, that's something that I asked Marco Sturmer about on Monday was just, how hard is it to manage your patience while realizing the grind you're on. And so I think that they can finally take a breath now, guys, and go, okay, 14-25, that's over. 13-26, still not great, but, it's better than 14-25. And so I feel like now with more practice time, they're going to get a chance to reset, regroup, refresh, and become more of that team that they hope to be and the team that we saw on Saturday against Carolina.
Yeah, it feels like they're trending in the right direction. So my curiosity, because you mentioned consistency, and that's very much what this team is looking for at the moment. Where do you need to see them be more consistent sooner rather than later? Because we've seen them win in different fashions, actually amongst both of their 3-game winning streaks, to say the least. Like Saturday, what impressed me the most was finally picking up some consistent points with 5-on-5 because they're kind of sitting bottom of the barrel when it came to 5-on-5 play. But where do you need to see the consistency come in quicker to be like, okay, we can breathe with this team. Ride the emotional roller coaster, but breathe.
Yeah, I thought these last 2 games, Thursday, Buffalo has 40 shots on goal, but did you feel like they had a lot of really high-quality looks, perhaps later in the game, but for the most part, it felt like they were kept to the outside. I thought on Saturday they were checking really well, keeping the Hurricanes at bay. And that's a team that wants to play fast and dictate the game and dictate the flow of pace. And I felt like the Bruins managed that pretty well. And so I think that's where you want the consistency, right? The defensive game, the defensive commitment, so to speak, like that has to be there every night for this team, right? Because that's going to be their bread and butter. When you have Lindholm and McAvoy and Zadorov and you can throw those guys on different pairings throughout the night based on how you mix and match, which you saw a little bit of on Saturday. You know, Zadorov was with McAvoy mostly, sure, but you did see some stretches there where Zadorov was with Yoki Haru. And so if you can balance those guys out and make sure one of your big dogs are out on the ice at all times and they have that defensive buy-in, it's going to make your life a lot easier, I think, if you're Marco Sturm. And so that's an area where I just say the defensive consistency, you know, because that's been their downfall. You know, when the between the circles are wide open, when the slots are freeway, you know, that's when they get into trouble. That Ottawa game's a great example of that. And so I just think their defensive commitment and their buy-in, it's hard to ask it to be there every night, but this is the team they built. This is what they have to be. And so I think if your big dogs are rolling like that every night, Lindholm, McAvoy, and Zadorov, you're going to be a better team. And I think that's where I want the consistency to be, because those three guys are just so important to this team's, you know, connectivity, their spinal cord, whatever you want to call it. Like, they are those guys for this team, it feels like.
I asked Marco Sturm about what he liked about Zadorov and McAvoy together, and he didn't exactly answer it. He talked about that, you know, they've got to be their best and the defensive responsibility that you just mentioned. But you have two big bodies, two guys that lay a lot of hits a game, you know, and they're playing well together. But like you said, we've seen things kind of jump around, move around in games depending on situations, special teams, all that kind of stuff. What do you like or do you not like Zadorov and McAvoy together? I don't mind it, even though some of the feedback here in the office has been, and on our set, has been that maybe spreading those guys out would be the better play, but he's not doing that. What are your thoughts on the two of them together?
I got to say, I love Zadorov and McAvoy together. I think that they read off each other very well. I think both of them have a tendency to step up when the moment calls for it. And now the problem is, if both those guys are trying that at the same time, you know, that could lead you into trouble. But I just like the attitude of that top pairing. And I like it because both guys embrace the challenge of going against other team's top players. And it's a challenge that I think suits someone like Zadorov and his personality. And it suits McAvoy and what he wants to be and what the Bruins hope he can be. And I just find that's a better fit than, say, Lowry and McAvoy. I just don't know if Lowry is ready for those top pairing assignments. They're very difficult assignments, especially in today's NHL. And so I just feel like there's a certain attitude and a certain edge that top pairing of Zadorov and McAvoy has that this team needs. You know, like, I think the problem with last year, Sophia, was that you had a lot of guys that wanted to do the right thing, but they're better foot soldiers than leaders, so to speak. And I feel like Zadorov can lead with how he plays. McAvoy obviously wears a letter. I just feel like if you're going into battle, that's a top pairing that I really like because of the attitude and the edge and the tenacity they can set as the standard for the rest of the team.
I love the attitude angle because I think that's going to be important too as they continue to get confidence in this structure that they're now playing. But speaking of kind of finding more consistency on the back end of things, that usually plays to a strength for goaltending. We've seen both goaltenders be under siege in different ways. High danger chances. I mean, Korpisalo has probably been the most stout here. But what do you make of this competition and basically how they can learn and feed off of each other? Because huge performance out of Swayman on Saturday.
Yeah, huge, and you needed it, right? And we don't know ultimately if the goal was to sort of tweak Swayman a little bit and maybe push him by sitting him 2 games in a row, something that he hadn't experienced since Linus Ullmark was traded out of town. They didn't bench him for 2 games in a row at all last year when healthy, and so I love it from a competition standpoint, and I feel like it's going to bring the best out of both goaltenders, right? If you got 2 guys going and they're both confident in how they're feeling, they want the net, right? And Swayman talked about it after Saturday's game where he said you're addicted to winning, right? And when you're not winning, you're addicted to trying to get back in the win column. And I feel like, you know, when the Bruins pay a goaltender $8 million, a lot of people think that goalie has to play 60 games. I don't. I think you're paying for peak performance. And if you can get peak performance by, you know, having basically a timeshare in net between Korpisalo and Swayman, I love that because that's how you maximize the value of an $8 million goaltender and a $3 million goaltender. It's an expensive tandem, and if you're not utilizing it as a true tandem, then that's a lot of money for, you know, a 80-20 split or a 75-25. Yeah, like you want to keep those guys fresh and at, you know, optimal performance, peak performance, whatever term you want to use. And I'm okay with keeping Swayman at 45 to 50 games if you're getting this kind of play out of Jonas Korpisalo.
I agree with you. I really like that point about you're paying for not maybe games played, but peak performance in the games that you are playing, unless your 1B or your backup isn't playing well, then that $8 million hopefully turns into you're playing 65 games at peak performance. But while you have that other goaltender that's playing great, and Jonas Korpisalo has been great, then you just show up when you're put in net. So I do like that angle about the contract and the money and then how that's split and divided. And to Casey's point, the competition, very important for both of them. And, you know, they're not like hugging it out like Allmark and Sway did, but I'm not in the room that much anymore, Ty, just because I'm on studio and then during the show can't be going to practice. So I actually haven't seen their dynamic that much, but they're buddies, right? Like they're fun.
Oh, yeah.
They're not BFFs, but they're cool.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's a little bit different a year ago, right? Like Swayman's not in camp when camp begins, and then when he comes in, he's not trying to, you know, he's kind of trying to learn everything on the fly while getting his own game in order. You know, it's a difficult task, right? And so this year, I feel like there's a rift there. I just feel like they're in much more of a tandem, right? Much more of a partnership than they were a year ago. And you can tell, you know, like you can tell just by the body language, the support for one another. I don't think either guy would sabotage the other guy, even if they weren't, you know, besties or they're not close, whatever. That's not how a locker room works, as we all know. But, you know, I just feel like they're in a better place now, right? And I thought that last week was important for Korpisalo, who was open last year about saying he wanted to play more. He thought he should have played more. And he has a great game against the Islanders, finishes it very strong, and then they give him the next start. You know, like that's important in terms of the organization and Korpisalo establishing trust, right? And establishing that, hey, if you play well, we're going to give you the games. Don't worry about it. Because there were times last year where Korpisalo gave you a great start, and then he was on the bench for 3 games in a row. And so that's what I liked about last week, where you're giving him the runway here, proving that this year is different than last year, and that you want it to be a more symbiotic relationship, a more, you know, a true tandem, a true partnership. And I think that's what's going to be best for the Bruins, best for Korpisalo, and best for Swayman as well.
Yeah, and I feel like it's smart to ride the momentum. Like, if Korpisalo has the momentum at the moment, and depending on your opponent, he has been very strong with high danger chances, and you see a lot of these successful teams actually have a good 1-2 punch with their goaltenders. Let's talk about some of the blended lines that have been taking place. I'm a big fan when things get thrown in the blender. Some fans panic, though. We've seen a lot of Twitter storms when it's like, Husnudinov is your 1C, what the heck? And call the guys from Providence, it's time. Might be a hot take. I'd love your opinion because we're so excited to have you back on the show. I feel like everyone who thinks that it's time to call anyone in Providence isn't particularly paying attention to the fact that systematically they might be able to contribute offensively, but I don't think that their offensive skills would translate in this system right out the gate like everyone assumes. And I think that Husnudinov very much earned that opportunity to be in a top 6 role, let alone 1C. What did you make of all of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great point, Casey, and I think that you have to look at it from the standpoint of if you are a player who made this roster, right, and this is the first injury they've had up front, you're going to reach into Providence and call up a guy from Providence. What does that do to the morale of the players that made the team and have been putting in the work as a healthy scratch or as the extra body? They're out there working with whether it's Steve Spott or Jay Leach or Chris Kelly or whoever, the skills coach. You know, they're out there putting in the work after practice and they're waiting for their opportunity. And then it shows up, and then you give it to somebody else who is in the organization, yeah, but has been playing in Providence. You know, I think you have to be mindful of the morale and of the locker room and of the, you know, sort of the message you're sending, especially as a first-year head coach, right? And so, you know, I asked Marco Sturm when they were losing about, you know, what changes are you going to make to this team, and he said there's not a lot we can make. And so he's understanding that this is the group they have, and they're going to give them a pretty long leash to work out of things. And you know what? I love Marat Husnudinov being on the top line because you traded Justin Brazeau at the deadline. You didn't get a pick, but you got this player who was a second-round pick a few years ago, was buried on the 4th line in Minnesota. And Minnesota would tell you, people in Minnesota would tell you straight up, they go, we don't think he's a 4th liner, but we don't know where else to put him. You know, like, this is a chance for the Bruins to basically have a potential Morgan Geekie 2.0 here, where you give the player elevated role, elevated minutes, more offensive zone usage, and he becomes something for you. Because there's a lot of unknown with this team right now. We know they have Pasternak, we know they have Geekie, we know they have Lindholm. But beyond that up front, I mean, your most certain player behind that is probably Pavel Zacha. And so you have room to develop some younger players and have some guys be found money for you. And so that's what I like about using Husadinov in an elevated role. You see it, right? You see the vision that he has offensively, the plays he can make, the speed. I feel like that's a player that you really should try to juice up in your top 6 somewhere, and you hope it works, right?
Yeah, Kasey and I talked about it, and I was saying I'm not calling this person this guy, but Brad Marchand started as a 4th-line player and worked his way up. And to Kasey's point about people on social media kind of like tweeting about that, like, what are we doing? Yeah, or like, oh my God, this is where we're at. We're so desperate. It's like, okay, hold on. It's just a couple games. And it wasn't a panic move. It was a reward move. Yeah. That's what it was. So there's a difference there. And then let's see. Like, I don't know. It's not set in stone. You can change it within the game if you want, but let's see how a couple games play out. And
well, you and I also talked about the fact, and Ty, you basically just mentioned it too, Minnesota had him projected to be a top 6 guy, period. But as you mentioned, they didn't have the room and the capacity to put him there at the moment.
Yes, and the Bruins do. And Marco Sturm said he liked what he saw in terms of strength on the puck, and that's something that is really emphasized with this team right now. And it's like the way they've been giving up pucks and coughing up pucks, and then defensive responsibility. We've already talked about that. That's not like it. That's not what got him to the top line, but just how hard he works. So let's see where this goes. But I'm liking it so far for sure. And it sounds like you are too.
Yeah, I just think that, they are in a weird spot as a franchise, right? For so many years, it was, well, you had Bergeron, you had Marchand, you had Krejci, you have Pasternak. And it was about finding guys that could just fit in, right? Like, I feel like where they are right now, like, there's room for a game breaker to emerge. Like, if you can dominate your matchups, or if you can prove that you can be a 40-point guy on a 2nd or a 3rd line, like, they need those too, right? Like, you look at sort of the talent drain in recent years, moving on from DeBrusk, trading Marchand, like, they got room for guys to step into some big roles here, right? And so I think, it's important on the team to give players that opportunity, and let them either sink or swim, right? And this is something that the Bruins did back in 2007, 2008 with David Krejci, with Vladimir Sobotka, Patrice Bergeron. Like, these were guys that had elevated roles, and some proved to be key contributors or supporting cast members, and others were traded. And so I feel like this is kind of where they are right now. Like, they want to be a playoff team, obviously. They should be in the mix for a wild card spot, maybe even a little bit more given the Atlantic right now. But you have a lot of room here to find out which guys are going to be part of your core that you're building. You're rebuilding your core right now, and which guys aren't. And I think that's a big, bonus for a guy like Marco Sturm, who's a first-year head coach. Claude Julien had the same thing in 07, 08, where he was able to find out, okay, who's part of my solution and who's not, right? And I think that's an underrated element of this year's roster, I think, to a certain degree.
I love any sort of diamond in the rough conversation. But before we let you go, who's jumping off the page for you? I like to ask every guest this because, of course, off-season wasn't sexy, but still, to your point, you kind of find the guys that work within the system and make things make sense. I've gone to bat for Tanner Jeannot, even though everyone still doesn't love his contract. I feel like he's stepped up tremendously, but Fraser Minten is a fan favorite by far for a number of reasons. Who are you giving flowers to?
I think Mark Kaslick has been fantastic, and he started hot a year ago. Obviously, had some injury issues with the concussion that kind of derailed his year, but high motor, draws penalties, wins his faceoffs. A guy that can play center, can play wing. He's currently playing a little bit up the lineup right now, and just a guy that I think embodies their attitude, right? And look at that goal he scores against Buffalo last Thursday. He's playing to the whistle. He's playing to the final horn. He scores it from his butt, basically. Like that's what the Bruins want to be, right? And I think a guy like Kaslick is an underrated, mid-tier kind of leader, right? He can be a bottom 6 leader where he's perhaps not doing it with how he speaks, but how he plays. And I think that's a guy that he's shown up in a big way out of the gate this year, and I think he's been awesome for them. So I gotta go there. But I'm also tempted, Casey, to go Jonathan Aspero, a guy who
He's been impressive.
put his time in the minors, 300 and something games in the AHL, makes his debut a week ago. Defensively, Marco Sturm has repeatedly cited how well he closes and how quickly he closes, and that's a system fit for them, and you're going to ride it until the wheels fall off, but if he can be a defensive stopper for them, I mean, that's one less thing you're worrying about on that left side that we've talked about so much.
I love all your points, Ty. Tell us where we can find your work, or where fans can find your work, when and where, because I know you have time slots on 98.5. So go ahead and do that, and then I have a final quick question.
Absolutely, yeah. You can find me every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on 98.5 The Sports Hub. It's the hockey show every Saturday morning, so we'll always be there. It'll be myself and our broadcast crew at 98.5 as well, popping in studio or on the phone lines, depending on where they are. And you can also find all my written work at 98.5thesportshub.com as well. So, and just type in my name on Google, and you'll find where I am on social media. I'm on all the platforms, so I'm there.
My last final question is a quick one about nightmares. Apparently, it's common for a lot of people to have reoccurring dreams about forgetting about one course in college, and you're about to graduate, and then you're like, oh my God, I didn't go to class. Has that ever happened to you?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I'm a two-time college dropout.
Okay.
So I never graduated. So I think I just lived that nightmare instead of experiencing it a few times. No, the one that I always have is that I missed a flight and I have to find a new way of getting to a city. So whether that's a bus or a train. So I've become very good at learning all of my ways to get to city Y from city X, just in the event that it actually ever comes to be. So there's that.
Okay, well, I hope it doesn't, and I hope our dreams are better to us tonight. Thanks for your insights on our show. We'll have you on again, I'm sure, in a couple of weeks. And the Bruins taking on the New York Islanders tomorrow on the island. Ty Anderson joining us. Thanks so much. We're going to send it to break. We'll be right back after this.
Ty.